guys, welcome back to Clockwork Noodles for another breakdown of Golden Kamuy Season 4, episode number 5. We are now a week away from my midway review, where I will be crowning my top 3 OPs, EDs, and current standing of anime. This is going to be a difficult one for me because I'm enjoying so many titles, and to have to pick 3 of them and maybe an honourable mention, it's going to be very difficult for me. I am going to do it, and I hope you guys tune in to see how those dice end up rolling. But things will change, as we always see in the midway compared to the end of season reviews. There's normally a lot of change. Some things get better, some things get worse. It's going to be interesting to see how my opinions change by the end of it. But we are in for another fantastic episode. I had just come back from Comic-Con and I did see a Sugimoto. I was so happy. Once I found Sugimoto, I literally, every 10 minutes or so, I would see him again. So Sugimoto was stalking me, but I was so happy because I very rarely see anybody cosplaying from Golden Kamuy. So I was very excited to see it happen. So let's jump into it. We now have a grace period of 2 weeks before we end up reconvening with Leaky Brain. It's all now finally getting down to the nitty-gritty of the plot. So this week's episode is in-depth. There's a lot going on and we want to finally discover what did Isirapa learn. And Sugimoto's the one who's deciding that he's going to go and try and get it out of her. I do agree that she won't open up to Leaky Brain. I don't believe she's going to go up to Leaky Brain and be like, oh, this is it. This is what I learned. This is how you're going to get the gold. I don't think that's going to be the case. I do believe Leaky Brain can be very charming, especially if he wants something like gold, but I don't think he's going to be the right person to get her to open up. Now, the big joke about Tanigaki having big balls is actually something quite ironic because a few weeks ago, the author ended up releasing a chart for all of the characters in Golden Kamuy. It ranks them on their size of their little members or big members, depending on who you are. And Tanigaki was actually in the bigger end of that chart. You can go find it. I believe I saw it on Instagram. I think it came up on Instagram, my side. I'm sure if you type it in, but be very careful about what you're typing in because I think you're going to get some really weird results on this one. It's out there and I like that about the author. He has a sense of humour and he's created this list to put all of the male characters in some kind of order based on, well, their dicks. There are a lot of references to dicks this week, and as always, it's Golden Kamuy. I did say if I ever get monetized, I'm not making any money when it comes to Golden Kamuy. We've got Dick Sensei, and there's so many dick jokes in this. There's no way. I'd be so shocked if it was ever allowed to be monetized. We are quite far from those concerns anyway, so we get to talk about it as much as we like. Focusing on Isirapa, she wants to be a modern Ainu, and there's this idea that she likes the modern things, and she does admit that some of the rituals are there just to focus you, not really actually do anything. Nice to see Isirapa and Sugimoto finally having some time together. It does feel like these two have had a long time with them actually chilling out, hanging out together. Sadly, this does get disturbed by the filmmakers. At least it's a win-win situation where they end up getting what they want on film. We end up hunting Wolverine, and at the end of the day, poor Sugimoto states that brain really just does taste like brain. There's not really any difference between it. What's haunting Isirapa is the idea of leaving behind her traditions. How are we going to pass down our tradition? As much as she is a modern Ainu, she wants to leave her tradition to the future. She doesn't want the Ainu to be forgotten. She doesn't want any of it lost to time. And obviously, a lot is now weighing upon her shoulders because of this talk with Kiraranke, of what happened with Wilk. All of this is on her shoulders, and this is where this episode is actually a lot more important than the fun and games that it masquerades under. So the answer this week is to film. Try filming some of these stories. It's a nice answer because it records history and we learn many things by finding old film from the past, and we can learn a lot about what happened and what people were wearing and how people were acting. We do see the limit, very early period of film. I like the fact that it's filmed that Isirapa turns to initially because she does have quite the modern outlook when it comes to trying to pass on all of these traditions, but we do hit the wall quite quick because, well, we don't have voice. We can't record any of the sound, which is where they turn around and use the idea of the gramophone so we can put 2 and 2 together. But then there's this issue that the Ainu don't have plays. They are quite the oral tradition where they pass down stories from generation to generation. So Isirapa, the modern Ainu, having to come up with a play or something just to get some of these dances, some of these traditions down onto footage, which immediately tells me that it's not quite what she wants to go anyway, because she wants to pass on these traditions, but the Ainu don't do plays. It's not a thing. So as soon as you say we're going to put on a play, and I love it because it does involve absolutely all of our cast, it's nice to see, but it also feels like we're veering away from what it is she's trying to get across. Golden Kamuy is one of those animes which will also teach us a lot of history, and I love the fact that we too get to learn about some of these stories. Whether these stories are true or not, or a little bit embellished, I'm not quite sure. If you do have any knowledge of these traditions or any of these stories, you're allowed to tell me if they are somewhat accurate. But I do admire her wish, the wish to teach the world all about her customs, her culture. The fact that we, the audience, are learning these stories. Maybe she's actually achieved something that she will never even realise. Everybody watching Golden Kamuy is listening to these stories, and they are going to remember, especially me. I love Golden Kamuy. Ever so often we'll think back to even earlier seasons and how much I really enjoy it, and even just seeing Tsukamoto at con, that made my day. So maybe she doesn't realise it, and she doesn't realise that she's in an anime, but maybe these stories are really going to be at least known by some people, whoever watches Golden Kamuy. So the theme this week is definitely very related. It's very heavy in how we learn, and I also love how the cast is involved. We get Asiropa playing our demanding director, who at one point wants to rip down a house because it's in the way. That's hilarious. That's so funny. She has this dream about what she wants to see. I didn't realize that Koito was playing Tsukamoto's wife. It took me way too long to realize who was playing it, because I thought they'd just borrowed a Ainu woman from the village, but they didn't. They actually have Koito playing the woman. When it comes to Shiraishi and Tsukizuma, who is playing the big booby lady, a perfect match there. I love how serious Tsukizuma's face really always is. These stories are perfect because the roles she ends up divvying out are also perfect for the Escape King. The Escape King ends up dying like a moron on every single story. Perfect for Shiraishi. It's almost like those stories are made from his adventures. I also enjoyed seeing Vasily painting the sets, because we've already established he's a very good artist, so it's nice to have a use of his talent. It was also hilarious to see Shiraishi coming back alive again at the end of part 2 of the story. Apparently in these stories, this character just dies a lot, then comes back to life again, which hammering down that the character that he's representing is a moron. I think the moral of these stories is you can't replicate other people's successes piece by piece. You have to go out there and find your own success. What works for one person won't necessarily work for the other person. So those are the morals to these stories, I think, that the stories are trying to get across. But we do see Asiropa getting more and more desperate to leave her culture for the future, and I think this is where Tsukamoto starts to realise that she's very desperate to do it, or something is definitely on her mind, because she's taking on a lot. You're trying to record an entire culture. How can you document an entire culture of people? There's a lot to get down. There's more than just recording the story. It's what it means to people, because people looking at the stories in a later date not really going to get the meaning of it, which I think she eventually realises down at the end of the episode. But it is the serious side that is going on under all the fun and games this week, and I'm really enjoying this episode. It's nice to have a moment to enjoy a serious plot with our main characters before the plot obviously gets heavy and serious, because I think at some point we're going to meet Leaky Brain, and I think a lot of hell is going to kick off at some point. I would even say it gets very serious at the end of the episode, when we finally see some stress with our two characters, Asiropa and Tsukamoto, starting to realise that they may not be on the same page. So Asiropa this week wanting to leave her stories for the future, but she ends up getting a message from 10 years ago via the very means that she is relying on, the idea of film. And we get to see a very much alive Wilt, Asiropa's mum. This is the first time I believe that we have seen her. And I think the anime has done this on purpose to give us that same feeling that Asiropa does when she sees her mother for the first time, what she looks like. Though despite the fact that she says it's not the same as learning from the stories, because her father would tell her stories which would make her feel more alive, and actually hearing it and with the emotion behind it from somebody who was there who knew the person, there's a lot more to gain about a person. You can feel that person as opposed to looking at a picture. Pictures can tell 1,000 words, but you're never really going to learn everything from just looking at a picture of her mother. But it is nice for me to even just see it. Now, heartbreaking at the end when the fire ends up ruining everything, and we've probably lost that footage from 10 years ago, which is really, really sad. It's sad as well because they did say this is actually quite a real thing because of the nature of the way that they play it. A lot of footage has been lost. There's a lot of things that have been lost to time, which is always really sad. The historian in me has never really gotten over the loss of the Library of Alexander. Things get lost to history. Even stupid errors just occur even in history, and we lose so much information. So we're going to go into the final half where Asiropa starts to realise it's not going to be the same. We can't rely on footage because all of the things that I'm trying to get across across just don't have the same meaning, and they won't have the meaning because they won't mean anything to anybody else. And that's when Asirpa finally learns the final message that Wilk passed on. Asirpa herself doesn't want to go back to sitting, hunting bears, going hina hina every time. She has grown up. She's seen so much now that she can no longer possibly even go back to be the old person that she was. So we're starting to see stress upon the relationship between Sugimoto, who wants to protect her, and maybe he wants to protect himself as well. But this isn't what Asirpa wants, and this is the point when we see these two starting to veer away a little bit, because as much as Sugimoto gets angry because Asirpa never got a choice, in all of this story you've been set up to be this leader figure, but you've been wrapped up in it since birth. You've never had a choice of deciding what's right for you. Asirpa is starting to realise that, well, actually, this is the path that's been laid down before me by very many people. There are a lot of people who are relying on me right now. And she's starting to see the stresses of the reality of losing an entire culture of people, a tradition, and what's going to happen if things do get modernised and her culture's going to get wiped off the map. Asirpa may be cursed by her blood, but at the same time, I can't see Asirpa agreeing to just leave the race for the gold. As much as Sugimoto is begging her to do so, and because he cares for her, I do not see her agreeing. I don't see her turning away from the path that has been placed heavily upon her shoulders to follow. So I believe that she's actually going to disagree, and I think this could cause a point of contention between the characters, which is sad, but I don't think he'll leave her. I don't think he'll be able to just turn away because he doesn't agree with her decision. I think he will still try and be a guardian, but it is going to take a little while to maybe mend the relationship because they're not on the same page. So we are seeing the stress in our two main characters finally. It does make me nervous because I'm also on the side that I think Asirpa should be the one to decide. I do get why Sugimoto's angry, but even knowing that, and Asirpa knows that people have put a lot on her and she's been labelled as this big leader, this big fighting figure, it still is her culture, her people, and a lot of people have left a lot on her shoulders. So if she walks away, that's down to her. It should be her decision. I love Sugimoto, I love him to pieces, and he's so wholesome, but I think he's going to have to let her make a grown-up decision. As much as he hates the decisions she makes, I think he's going to have to stick with her. And I think it's going to be a growing point with our main two characters. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's been a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the idea of learning cultures, learning stories, and also just looking at the stresses that are starting to come out and seeing the story, in essence, start to really bubble up. And what it's all coming down to is the idea that there's a lot of people riding on Asirpa. She's not just dragged into it for the fun of it. She's there almost as a bit of a hope for her people. Will be interesting to see what the consequences are next week. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you're having a good week. I hope you're looking after yourselves. It's getting colder. Happy Halloween. It is Halloween as I am recording this. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you're having a good Halloween. Have a good day, guys. Bye-bye.